So the model of state retention for server-side controls is pretty straightforward when you're looking at controls that render as input elements that are sent back as part of the post request. Where it becomes less straightforward is when you are talking about controls that do not contribute anything to the post body as part of a post request. So this includes things like divs and spans and tables and anything else that doesn't contribute any information to the post body, and it's basically everything that's a non-input element. And the issue is, if ASP.NET is going to provide programmers with the concept of state retention for their controls across postbacks, it's sort of important that they do so across the board. So whether you have a label or a text box or a drop-down list, you can be assured that the state that was manipulated by the client or the state that was set initially is going to be there on the subsequent postback to the same page. So in order for this to work across all controls, we need a secondary mechanism for retaining that state. And that secondary mechanism is called ViewState. So ViewState is the additional hidden input element that is generated when each page is rendered, and it is used by controls to insert additional state that will be round-tripped as part of the postback. Now this is a very standard mechanism in web development, web programming, to create a hidden input field and populate it with state that you want to retrieve on the subsequent postback. So it's basically just a codification of that hidden field state retention mechanism into a more generic mechanism, which still relies on the hidden field, but the controls themselves will take care of populating that hidden field. And when you take a look at it, you'll notice that it is a base64 encoded string that's going to be storing that state. So to show you this, I thought I would start off with a small example here, just to keep it very simple and illustrative. So I'm going to create another web form. Let's call this one ViewState. And I'm just going to put a label onto this form, and let's give this label an identifier of underscore sum label. And I'm going to set the initial text to 0. Actually, not sum. Let's make it accumulator. So I basically want this thing to accumulate over time, add a value each time. And let's drop a button on to issue a post back. I really don't care about the button. It just has to issue a post back to the server. So let's go ahead into our code behind now and change the value of the label each time it comes back. So I'm going to do an int val is set equal to int dot parse of the accumulator label dot text. So we take whatever value is currently in there, and then we're going to set the accumulator dot text equal to val plus 1 dot toString. Okay, so we'll just increment it every time the request comes back. And I also want to do this only if we're not in a postback. So we check the isPostback flag, and if we're not in a postback, then we're going to, no, I'm sorry, I want to do this every time. So I'm going to actually do this every single time. So every time it comes back, I'm going to grab the value out of the accumulator, and I'm going to increment it, and then I'm going to set it back into the accumulator to whatever value it was before. Now, what we should notice is that the accumulator value is going to start off as 0, which is what I've set it to here in the markup. But then the question is, what will it be on a subsequent postback? So will it be the initial default value of 0, or is it going to be something reflecting what we actually made modifications to in the server previously? So let's go ahead and try running that. And notice that initially the value is 1. That's good. We expected that because it looked at 0, incremented it up 1, and then it got value of 1. And if I push it again, notice the value is now 2. So what we're seeing is that the state for that label control, which is rendered as a span, is going to be saved across requests back and forth to the server. Now, just to show you that the label itself is not part of the post body, let's go ahead and issue a new request here and go ahead and post the form. So here's the request that we just issued. looking at the raw request and response. So it was a post request, and the post body down here, notice it included the button as part of the input, but nothing else, right? There's no, well, there's a view state, but there's no representation for the accumulator control, and that's because it just renders as a span, and it's not naturally part of the post body. So in order for this thing to retain its state, it must have used some other field that was passed back via this post. And in fact, it did. It used this ViewState field. So that's what we're going to be looking at here, this ViewState field and how it persists values across postbacks for controls that do not intrinsically have their values sent back as part of the post request.